All right, let's go ahead and get rolling. Okay, if you haven't turned your phone down or turned it off, put it on vibrate, that'd be really helpful. And if somebody could close the doors, that'd be great. This is an open meeting. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. There's a lot of parents, community members here, press, and so on. So it's a very diverse audience tonight. So welcome to the Bellevue Wolverine Football Club Forum regarding the BSD-WIA investigation. My name's Rob DeRuyter. I'm a parent. I'm also the program director for the Bellevue Wolverine Football Club. So what does that mean? I work a lot with the parents and all the different programs that we do throughout the year. Whether it's travel or team dinners or games or food trucks or organizing things with the high schools and away games as well. So all kinds of things. Let me set the stage a little bit tonight. I want to first do introductions and talk a little bit about the agenda tonight. So we're a couple minutes late already, but we're going to roll through this pretty quick. We got about 60 minutes worth of content. After I get done talking, Chris Sampson's going to come up and talk from a club perspective. And then Butch Gontroff is going to come up. Butch Gontroff, the head coach of the Bellevue Wolverines football team. And then Tina Alexev is going to come up and have a few comments. And then we've got a few guest parents here tonight. Carla Cross, Mike Rogers, Coach Brown, Marissa Spooner-Leduff, and Marianne Jones will speak on different topics. And then we'll have a spot for Mr. Scott Powers, Bellevue High School principal, and Lauren McDaniel, Bellevue High School athletic director, to speak a little bit. And then at the end, Pat Jones will be up to do an overview of the investigation, as well as go through some specifics. Okay, so let me set the stage a little bit for tonight. Number one, thanks for coming. I know it's a little bit late. I know this is a long topic, and it's a complex topic. But we're here tonight to expand on the conversation around the investigation. This is a very complicated topic for everyone. Believe me, I've spent hours on it, as well as many of you in this room have spent hours and months on this. But there are two things going on right now that our football team and program and our community at large have major issues with. Number one is the release of inflammatory accusations and findings about the investigation, given a report that really no one has seen. So that's number one. So keep that in mind as you think about this and hear all this tonight. Number two is that during the investigation, the WIA investigators turned it into what we believe is a very racially biased investigation. So I'm going to stop there and just pause for a second. So I kind of set two paths in motion. And I know there's a lot more detail. There's more than you have time for or want to hear. But that's why we have Pat here tonight with a lot of documents we've already shared, because we've already done our kind of investigation that goes along with this. But those are really the two paths I think you should be thinking about right now. There's a lot of detail to come. An investigation that when the investigators met with the students and parents and repeatedly committed HIB violations, harassment, intimidation, and bullying violations towards those students during the process, is unbelievable. The more we hear, I wasn't personally in any of those meetings, obviously, but the more we hear about it, it's just unbelievable. I can't believe it happened, but it did. And here it is, 2016. Unfortunately, nobody at the BSD, Bellevue School District, or the WIA seems to care about that. They just let that roll. And that's not what we're here to let roll. We're going to put a stop to that. We have about an hour of content, like I mentioned, to go through. You'll get a lot of information tonight that's backed up by fact, not fiction. And believe me, if you see the binders next to Pat, you know it's coming. After we're all done, he'll be available for questions and more insights, more than you want to know. But again, I want to say thank you for coming tonight. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Sampson.
Thanks, Rob. I want to talk a little bit about the club's perspective on this. We spent a lot of time thinking about what we should say and what we should present this evening. Like Rob said, we wanted it really broken down in two parts. The first part are just the facts. We're not going to try to speculate and put the exhibits together with points. We're going to just present the facts as we know them. These are the facts that came from public record disclosures, emails, taped interviews and information that we've obtained from third parties. And then the other part is, of course, the family stories. Those are the two most important things that we're going to show tonight. We haven't seen the WIA's investigative report, but the press release from Bellevue School District and WIA, coupled with the inflammatory Seattle Times headlines, have allowed conclusions to be drawn by the court of public opinion. Read the press release that the WIA and the Bellevue School District put out together. First of all, if you can read it and understand it, that's an accomplishment. But then read it and look at the headline from the Seattle Times, and you tell me if that was any way fair and accurate. I guess we don't expect the Times to be fair and accurate, but minimally, it should represent what was written. The joint release did not include actual findings, despite being reported as fact. But the Bellevue School District superintendent did step up and has since issued a statement apologizing for creating the perception that the football program has been found guilty of violations. Dr. Mills reiterated that the findings have not been made public and no determinations have been made. And that letter came from him on his letterhead to many of the people here in this audience. We also believe the WIA's investigation was flawed from the onset. Many of you read this quote from Bob Westinghouse. We believe the investigators' stated objective, quote, is to level the playing field. This was stated in October to a Bellevue reporter, which gives you some sense of what perspective was brought to the investigation. But just as short as last week, the WIA investigators have shrugged off claims of misconduct in the press. They were quoted in the Bellevue Reporter and the Seattle Times. I just have a simple question. If the claims of misconduct are baseless, the word baseless was used by Bob Westinghouse, why was an investigator removed after complaints of conduct were made by BSD in October? He used the word, the claims are baseless. But an investigator was taken off the case. You ask me, how does that square? When he was removed, his removal was notarized by a letter sent to many of you in the audience by the Bellevue School District. We're not making it up. The letter came out, and Bellevue School District notarized that he had been removed. If the claims were baseless, why would Bellevue School District have a compliance officer interviewing the family's claims that have been made? We believe the investigators' stated objective to level the playing field at the onset of the investigation just reflects the bias that we're going to talk about tonight. The WIA also stated this week they had not received reports of misconduct from our Bellevue school reps who have been assigned to monitor the interrogations. We believe that if a Bellevue school board rep had witnessed harassment, intimidation, racism, they would be first obligated to report any misconduct in these interrogations to the district through the proper process. Why would misconduct by a WIA investigator be reported back to the WIA? It just doesn't make sense. But more importantly, if somebody did that, it wouldn't be following Bellevue School District policy. Sometimes you have to read between the lines when you read the headlines and understand and differentiate between fact and fiction.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, now I'm going to turn over to head coach Butch Gontroff.
People that know me, I'm a football coach. I don't live in shades of gray. I live in first down, second down, third down, fourth down. I'm not a politician. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody for their support. It means the world to me and my family. It really does. It's been a hell of a 15 months. Secondly, to my players, I'm here for you. I'm standing up here for you. These are high school kids, and for the last 15 months, they've been under siege. For what? There has been a bias about this program for years, and nobody knows it better than they do. We hear it all the time, and I'll say it again, how nobody can win games like you guys did. How do you do it? There's got to be a reason. Yeah, for the last time, we work harder than you. It's just that simple. We work harder than you. Give these kids some goddamn credit. I'm a 20-year employee of this school district, and I'm not here to bash it or this school. But I can't sit back anymore hoping people will stop worrying about public perception or how all this is going to look to them if they tell the truth. There are facts about this investigation and how it was conducted that have not come out and are important for everyone to recognize. This entire investigation began because of a Seattle Times Diploma Mill article on Academic Institute, in which Jason Gardner, an employee of Academic Institute for 5 months, and the key witness in that article and this entire investigation, was found by administrative law judge, quote, not credible, end quote, on the very issue the Seattle Times relied on him for. Apparently he lied to a judge. There's a lot of lying in this thing. Let me just tell you that. There's a lot of lying. Where's that story? Seriously, where's that story? Is that fair? The day these investigators were hired, the lead investigator was quoted, "My marching orders are to level the playing field." Not tell the truth, level the playing field. Already assuming the playing field needed to be leveled. Myself, coaches, students, families, and school personnel came into this hoping for a fair and unbiased investigation. Right away, it was apparent that was never going to happen. I was told in August this investigation would have a shelf life of 2 to 4 weeks. It lasted 8 months. In a football game, if you can't stop somebody, you hold them. What I finally learned about an investigation is if you don't get the answers you want, you harass and bully people, period. The tactics in this investigation are frightening. Investigators misrepresenting themselves, targeting minors without parental consent. These are facts. Harassing and bullying neighbors and landlords, going through people's garbage, and worst of all, racial profiling. Asking African American families how they could afford to live in Bellevue. Who pays their rent? How they can afford to drive the car they drive. The lead investigator said their argument is a smokescreen. Tell that to the families and the kids that have had to go through this. And ask yourself, like Chris said, if that's such a smokescreen, why did you have to dismiss an investigator? These investigators charge hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm curious who's paying for that. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. And who knows what their motivation is. But there is a fact. The mess these guys have left behind to families, to kids, to students, to coaches, it's real. My players know me, I'm real. No BS with me, I'm real. I'll tell you good or bad. This stuff is, to these kids, this is real and it's devastating. And maybe that's what they meant by leveling the playing field. Because we got work to do to repair this thing. I don't care what this investigative report says, I can tell you it certainly wasn't fair.
Thanks, Coach. Okay, I'm going to introduce Tina Alexa.
Hi. I'm here because I've had an opportunity to interact with the families that these investigators have interrogated. And I'm sorry, I've actually gone through this several times because I didn't want to do this, but I guess it's just so raw that this is me being raw, so I'm sorry. As you hear from these families, I want you to keep three things in mind. In two separate letters, John Harrison, who is the Bellevue School District Executive Director, told all these families that they would be asked questions based on a defined scope that was widely distributed to the football club members and the press. What we've learned through direct email with the WIAA is they never had any intention to stick with the scope, and that these parents and players were brought into these interrogations with under false pretenses. Number two, since September of 2015, the Bellevue School District that we elected, Dr. Mills, who is the superintendent, John Harrison, and Jeff Lowell, who is the district athletic director, have been informed of the pattern of harassment, bullying, intimidation, and racial profiling that you're about to hear. In fact, families and players have been to school board members 8 times. We've sent letters to all these people and the WIAA trying to protect themselves and their sons from the tactics these investigators used. We now know that a Department of Justice complaint has been filed. Number three, each of these families that has filed either a formal harassment, intimidation, and bullying and/or discrimination complaints with the school district. Remember, no matter what the report says, there is absolutely no excuse, and I mean no excuse for completely irresponsible, unethical, and damaging tactics used by the investigators and the district administrator's failure to protect these families. Please welcome Carla Cross as our first speaker.
Good evening. Thank you for being here and listening to my story. We were one of the families, I think there were 14 of us that were contacted in January by letter coercing us to participate in the investigation. We always wanted to participate because anything that we had to offer would only help, if they just listened. So, the objective in the letter was we want to get to the truth. So I'm like, okay, that sounds good. But in the letter, it also said that, this is a quote, "A failure to cooperate may contribute to an adverse inference in the investigative report, which may be detrimental to the interest of BHS and its football program." Well, we didn't want to be detrimental, so we cooperated. So I contacted John Harrison by phone and by email because I wanted it documented. And my son's a minor. And so that was a big concern of mine. I didn't want, he's applying to college, he's hoping for scholarships and all kinds of things. And, I didn't want his name in the media. So I wanted to be sure that that wouldn't happen. And then, I wanted to make sure that I was there or my husband was there and someone from Bellevue High School to witness what might happen, because I wasn't comfortable. I knew these were seasoned investigators and we'd never been through anything like this before. It was already somewhat intimidating. I wanted it to be a positive experience for my son. I figured if we're doing this, he would learn something from it, right? It would be an opportunity he would take with him through the years and just chalk it up to, hey, it's an experience and I'm gonna learn from it. So the John Harrison, I gave him specific conditions. If we're going to interview, these are the things that are gonna happen. That I'll be present, and that I actually asked for the questions in advance, and that was the one condition that they didn't say that they just said that within the 5 parameters that have been widely distributed. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's all right. So we still showed up. And, another condition was conduct. I wanted my son and myself to be treated with respect, and, that they weren't gonna ask us about anyone else, that they were just gonna ask us about our story, because we moved here in 2013, and so my son started as a sophomore. We came from Florida, so we had a good story. We had no contact, and we picked the school because of academics and sports. So and we actually went to 5 different schools, and my son made a spreadsheet and ranked them in all these different criterias, and we told the investigators this, and of course they didn't really want to hear that. So they quickly the interview after those couple questions became what I was exactly trying to avoid. They turned the whole conversation around to when my son spoke at one of the Bellevue school board meetings in December, and he said that he felt his teammates were being treated unfairly and that the investigation was racially biased. So he said that in the school board meeting, as well as to the media after the meeting. And this is all they wanted to talk about. They wanted him to repeat verbatim, what exactly did you say at that board meeting? And I didn't want my son to, in that situation, he could misspeak, he could say that he said something that he didn't say. It was 3 months before. Why would he remember that exactly word for word? So I interrupted and I said, that's public record. You can get a copy of the transcript. That's not what this interview is supposed to be about. And so, they kept at it, and they basically lectured him about what it means to call someone a racist, and that they've seen his transcript, and he's a smart kid, and he should know better. That was, at that point, I was so shocked. I wanted to walk out of the room, but I was just so shocked that it was going in this direction. And, I told them so. I said, no one is going to speak to my son like that and lecture him. That's not what we came here for. If you don't get back to the 5 questions, we're going to leave. So that's pretty much the interview. And after that, I waited a couple weeks. Because one of my conditions was to have it recorded. So they did record it. 2 weeks passed. I didn't get my copy that I was supposed to get. And so I said, well, you know what? If I never get a copy, I better document exactly what happened. So I wrote a very long email, and I copied the investigators as well as the school board members. And nobody responded except one of the investigators. And he said, I don't agree with your recap of the interview, and we didn't do anything wrong, kind of thing. And the most important thing that was in that email is that he admitted, as for your suggestion that the interview was limited to the 5 issues identified in your email, we had no such understanding. We did understand that these were the 5 issues that the Bellevue School District had repeatedly urged as the limits of our investigation. we have consistently responded that WIAA did not want us to limit our investigation and that we would ask all questions that we believe to be relevant to our investigation. So they're self-serving questions about, they wanted my son to retract exactly what he said in the board meeting, like officially remove it from all records. That's what they wanted. So there was no way he was going to do that. I was so proud of him. He was very strong, and he's like, I'm not doing that. That's what it is. I wouldn't have said it if it wasn't true. So so when I got that response, I was like, wow, we were lied to, because if John Harrison told me that those were the 5 things and that was a condition of us agreeing to the interview, I would have never agreed to the interview if I knew the WIA did not support those 5 things. I trusted John Harrison to protect my family, and he did not. And therefore, I proceeded to do an HIV complaint, and I get weekly updates, but they're pretty weak at this point, so just waiting to hear the conclusion of that.
Mike Rogers.
Hi everybody, my name is Mike Rogers. I'm a father of a Bellevue High School student and player, also an assistant coach. Feels like we've been here many times now. Pretty tired, but the show must go on. I just got a statement here that I want to read. I had repeatedly requested the school district. Requested from the school district that they intervene and stop permitting the blatant discrimination and harassment that my son and family continue to be subjected to. It's intolerable, and this the racial profiling, the bigotry, and everything that they've done, man, it's just it's bad. I mean, it's 2016, and I would think that our kids shouldn't have to experience. They don't know color. They don't know differences. I mean, all they know is each other, and it's a shame that we got people out there that are still have that mindset. There's many phone calls that were placed out there, many conversations, emails, many comments at the school board, but all of that obviously fell on deaf ears because they still haven't done anything about it. Just give you a little history. We moved to Bellevue before my son's freshman year. And when we moved here to Bellevue, just like so many other families, we had to prove our residency. Let me see your lease. They want to verify everything. And, hey, that's fine. We'll go ahead and do it, and, unlike most other families, they verified mine, I believe, a few times. So, what's that all about? It's very infuriating that Black and minority families are under all this scrutiny and all the hell that they've been put through. These investigators have personally contacted my landlord and questioned whether I lived at my residence and asked if we paid our own rent. I work, my wife works, we make pretty decent money. I mean, this is America, right? I can live anywhere I want to live. Makes you feel less than human, man. It's not cool. It's something I definitely don't want to see my kid or have my kids see or go through. It makes you start to think, these questions of, can I afford to live in Bellevue? I think what the real question is can you be Black in Bellevue? Back before December, got word that there was going to be an article that was going to come out right before the state championship game. What a coincidence. And so I ended up reaching out and contacting John Harrison. And I said, hey man, you guys got to do something. Put out a press release because you guys know that we haven't done anything wrong. These families haven't done anything wrong. You need to do what you need to do. Put out something, protect these kids. He was like, oh yeah, I know, Mike. Everything's fine. Everything's great. You know, give me a call. Contact my communications officer, Elizabeth Seidman. So the next day I contacted her. And they kept both passing the buck off on each other. Oh no, John said this. Oh no, talk to Elizabeth. And when it came down to it, she said that there's nothing that they could do, nothing they could say to protect our kids. You know, I told her, I said, my son's name better not be in this paper. Better not be in this paper. You mess with my family, you mess with these kids, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. So the end of that story is there was nothing they could do. Nothing they could do. I wrote an email to John and Elizabeth, and just told them my frustration. You know, with them being so weak and not being able to do what they're hired to do is work for these kids, man. They should be in the business for these kids. You should think. During this time, I remember I answered the scope of the questions as Carla had mentioned that, you know, there were 5 questions, and I answered them. I emailed and I sent them. So figured, hey, that's good enough, right? But no, they came back, and John Harrison wrote a letter. I'll read it to you. I'll read you this insert. He said, the district wants the truth to come out. In accomplish this, I encourage you to support your son meeting with the WIA investigators to answer their questions honestly and completely. Your son's cooperation will contribute to the airing of all of the facts. A failure to cooperate may contribute to an adverse inference in the investigative report, which may be detrimental to the interests of Bellevue High School and its football program. You know, at this point, you know, I was like, yeah, my son's not talking to these people. I'm not going to subject him to all the mess that all these families have dealt with. Why? Why do it? You know, there's really no need for it. My son was in a transfer. We came here. We moved to Bellevue before my son's freshman year of high school. I mean, what more do I have to prove? You know, just like Carla's son, my son also went in front of the school board after this article was put out with his name as well as some of his teammates, and he was upset. He figured, hey, you know, let me get out. Let me say something, Dad. Let me talk. You know, let me make things right. Do you think it made it right? No, they ignored him just like they've been ignoring everybody else. And I know a lot of these kids, as well as my son, they're starting to feel like, you know, hey, this is just the way life is, you know, and this is the way it's going to be. But, you know, we got to come together and do something because this just is not right. Not right. And as a dad, you know, I touched bases with my son. He ended up, he's graduated early. He's in college now. We still talk, and you know, he's in the middle of he's going to Wazoo right now. He's in the middle of his quarterbacks meeting with Coach Leach, and Coach Leach comes up and asks him, so what's going on with Bellevue? What's going on? And my son's not there to be answering questions about Bellevue and investigations. He should be a kid. He should be enjoying and his college years, his college time. I mean, it's just ridiculous that these kids are subjected to all this. I know when I go to work, I'm a firefighter for the city of Seattle, and every station I go to, we get guys coming in. First question they ask me, what's going on with the cheating at Bellevue? What are you guys doing? Now I'm constantly having to defend my family, my kids, and it's just not right. These guys are trying to bring us down at all costs. It's just not fair. It's not fair. I hold John Harrison, Jeff Lowell, Dr. Mills, and the Bellevue School Board responsible for all the hell that these young men and families have had to endure. You know, they've made my son, made my family, made us feel helpless, obviously and lesser than. But I know that as the truth comes out, we will be vindicated. We will be vindicated.
Thanks, Mike. I just want to take an opportunity real quick too, as we're going through this, and kind of jump in here, is kind of bring you back to what I said earlier. You know, when the investigation first started, for whatever reason, there's many out there, but nobody was happy about it. None of us were, right? The coaches weren't, the school wasn't, nobody's happy about it. But I think at the end of the day, everybody's like, okay, bring it on. You know, let's go through the process. You know, we have nothing to hide, let's go. So off we went. But I want to remind you of those two paths I talked about in the beginning. There was an investigation that was supposedly just wrapped up when we see this report. But like Mike was just talking about, is this other thing happened during the investigation. And that's one of the major points that especially all the Bellevue parents in the room tonight need to really clearly hear, because I know I've talked to a lot of you about it, which, gosh, 4 or 5 years ago, before my kids were in high school, I'd have never thought. I thought, man, this school district's up here. It's top 50 in Newsweek. Are you kidding? And I'm glad we're top 50 or top 100 or whatever we are now. That's great. But there's obviously always room for improvement, and it sucks. But you know, you go through this and you go, where was the scope? Remember last summer, last fall, we're all saying, where's the scope on this investigation that's going on? And what you're hearing here is this parallel path. Yeah, the investigation's going on. Yeah, there's accusations against the program or the coaches or, you know, whatever it is. But the thing is, this other thing happened. And during these investigations, or these interrogations, we like to call them now, of the kids, it seems to be that this hip violation just was not a problem. And that's why I know so many of us are here going, that's a problem. That's a major problem. And we're not going to let that go. So that's the two paths. You know, it's kind of weird too, is I'll throw this at you, is sometimes you look at it too, and a lot of people say, oh, Bellevue, Butch, you won, I don't know how many rings now, or whatever, state championships and stuff. And Mike hit an important point there too. We don't control this process still. We're just here being reactive. We're trying to give you more information, more than you probably ever wanted to know. I wish we were just talking about spring football everywhere and going about our business, but we're not. We're here having this conversation, but that's okay. I was talking about this the other day, and it's like, if anybody can get through this, Bellevue will. I know that for a fact. And if we need to be the tip of the spear, not only for Bellevue or Bellevue sports in general, or the Bellevue School District sports, we'll do it. We'll take that on. We'll do it for us. We'll do it for Kinko. We'll do it for everybody. And we'll go through this. And we'll figure this out, because hopefully, kind of one of the things I always say is hopefully the silver lining here is everybody learns a little bit. I'm putting the challenge out there now to the district and the WIA and us, that I hope there's a lot of learnings here down the road, where it's not just spending a lot of time, a lot of money, and looking back at something that we did 5 years ago or yesterday or whatever it is, I don't know. But then also looking at it and saying, hey, what are we doing going forward? Because again, Mike hit an important point, and I want to emphasize it, is we're doing this for the kids. You know, there's kids that go out there every day and they're hitting and they're bumping heads, or they're playing baseball or whatever sport it is they're doing. And in the back end, yeah, we're trying to figure out new rules, or yeah, you know, the WIA Executive Board announced last summer, I think it was, they're going to look into the definitions of recruiting, which I'm sure everybody in this room has looked at by now. And nobody can identify or define those 10 bullet points. Can't. They look good 35 years ago. Not today. Because there's a lot of new things going on. And it's not just football, it's all sports. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Anyway, back on track.
Hey, one of the points I want to make, and I read about it in the press a lot, and I hear it from commentators and news sources. I'd like to ask somebody, when they use the word transfer, define what that means. So Mike said his son moved to Bellevue High School before his freshman year. We had kids interviewed that were in middle school that transitioned into the high school. And I hear the word transfer a lot. A transfer is when you transfer between high schools. A transfer is not when you're in 7th and 8th grade and you move into the district and start your freshman year. That's not a transfer. And I hear it a lot. And what's interesting is when you look at who the investigators targeted, sure, if they want to pull somebody out that came from Chinook Middle School who started in 8th grade and moved into the freshman year, that's fine. But why not ask the white kid who came in 7th and 8th grade and transitioned into high school? I'd assume if somebody attended Chinook Middle School and transitioned into Bellevue High School, that their addresses should be at least clean. So the next time you hear the word transfer or somebody in the press uses the word transfer, understand what it means. It's between high schools. It's not when somebody starts school in 7th and 8th grade in our boundary area and transitions into the high school.
Coach Brown.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. As you all may know, I am Coach Brown with the Bellevue High School football program, and I like to talk. So put your seatbelts on and enjoy this ride that I'm going to take you on. In all seriousness, I've been with the program, and I'm not going to talk about years, but I am going to share with you personally, because why I'm here is this whole debacle that, as Butch said, was supposed to be 2 to 4 weeks. And I want to give you a preference from where I'm coming from. During the beginning of this 2 to 4 week period, I had a little accident, spent some time in ICU. As some of you may or may not know, lots of drugs. I was a legally drug addict in the hospital. 13, all the stations, you name them, they came to my hospital room asking me about what was going on. And through conversations with our AD and our principal's office, no comment. And I was glad for that because I couldn't talk. So no comment was a good thing for me. I say all that in preference to me being called in to go and do my interview. After hearing all of the stories, I'm like, I'm ready. Let's go do this. I get to the interview, and the investigators, the first thing they asked me about was my education. And so I'm like, okay, I'm pretty good. BA, MBA, I'm a good guy. Then they started writing a list of questions to me that, as you've heard, the scope that the questions were supposed to be. Their questions came out to me, well, Coach Brown, since you're at the Bellevue program and all the colleges come to you when they're coming to look at kids, have you gone to their homes? And do you know that they live there? And I thought, let me ponder that for a second. Interesting question outside of the scope. Why would you ask that? Well, let me ask it a different way. And they ran down a list of names of kids that they wanted me to answer them on had I been to their homes. And I went down and no, haven't been there. Let me tell you where I have been. Maybe that can help you. Well, I told them whose homes I had been to. They said, well, that kid's not on the list. That kid's not on the list. That kid's not on the list. If this is a true investigation, why aren't these kids on the list if they're on our team? Well, the answer came back, well, they just were not on our list. And so as he's reading these names, I said, now you do understand the names that you read to me were all minority students? Oh no, we didn't know that. That's not on the list. Oh, so the questions you asked me about Mr. Baker or Mr. Jack, and you didn't know that they were, oh, excuse me. Why are you asking this question of me? I'm looking for accountability out of our leadership in our district. I'm looking for someone that's going to be accountable for those of us in our community. So he opened his mouth and he said, well, Mr. Harrison told us we could ask you, Coach Brown. We could ask you these questions. And I said to him, really? And my counsel said, really? And bless my counsel's heart, we happened to have our phone and Mr. Harrison on speed dial. Put it in the front of the table. Mr. Harrison answered the phone, and we asked him that question, and Mr. Harrison said, absolutely not. He used some other language that was a little stronger, and they could hear it. And at that moment, my counsel said, this interview is over, gentlemen. And I wanted you to understand what they were talking about and what they were trying to insinuate. Unless you've walked a mile in my shoes as an African-American man that's sitting there listening to you promote this in a community that we absolutely love and adore because you are our family, I thought, that's not right. So, leaving that, we made another appointment because now we wanted Mr. Harrison to understand the frustrations that these families are feeling and have felt and continue to feel. So what we did was after our next appointment, we went with Mr. Harrison and I happened to go to Snowflake Alley and we had an opportunity to meet with him in his office and to discuss what had happened to me in my interview. And Mr. Harrison was, hey coach, okay, I understand what you want to say, but I got a meeting to go to or an interview. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say interview. I have someplace else to go. And the question came up to John. This was supposed to be like 2 to 4 weeks in the beginning. Total, done, over. He said, yeah, we could have stopped this in October. However, we didn't want to give the appearance to others looking at us that we didn't do a job in our investigation. These are just the facts from Coach Brown. This is me personally sharing with you what happened during my time and interview in this situation. And again, I just want to say this in closing, and I'm going to get out of here. I am looking for leadership. I am looking for accountability. Someone, somewhere, has to be accountable for this whole thing happening. As my good friend said at the school board, if they're looking for heads to roll and they're trying to take down my friend here, there are some more heads other than his that better be rolling with it. That's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Thank you. Marissa Spinner-Leduff.
My name is Marissa Spooner-Leduff, and I don't like this microphone at all. Can you hear me? No. Want to hold it down here for me? Okay. Thank you. So, I don't even know where to begin, except to say that a newspaper article came out. And when this newspaper article came out, my boys decided to come up with this t-shirt idea to support Coach Butch. I thought it was a great idea. So I made the call to action and it happened. When I got the t-shirts done and people had ordered the t-shirts that said, "Stop Butchering Butch," we were giving the t-shirts out and I was asked if we were selling them. I told them no. The investigation had started, so it wasn't like I did this first and then the investigation occurred. It had already started because an article came out. Then I got in trouble in front of fans during the football game, lined up, and there was a police escort with our athletic director on one occasion, and within 30 minutes, again on another occasion, the police escort was with the principal, asking me the same exact question they had asked me earlier. Was I selling t-shirts, making money? I said no, parents had ordered. So therefore, I thought they would just walk away. Well, the second time they came, they humiliated my husband. They humiliated me. They certainly embarrassed Carla Cross, who was there, her and her husband, to help us. They all left me. And me being the strong black woman, because I don't go by the word African American, because I believe African Americans come here now from Africa, but I was born and raised and made in the USA. And so therefore, when the investigators came to my house asking how I could afford to live in Bellevue, how I came to be in Bellevue, I became very, very offended. Because my husband works hard and God blesses me because I try to do for others what God has done for me. And that's give me grace. And so, like Carla, I thought, oh, I'll go along with the interview. I want to help the program because I do have 2 transfers. One was Merrick, my son, who left O'Day High School as a senior. I think that's called a one and done. I learned that over here in Bellevue. Then I met Tyson, and I took Tyson in, and because Bellevue High School's football program, and this man right here to my left, made my son Merrick's high school year better than any of the other 3 years he had experienced, not because of football, but because he cared about him, because he was a good man to him. And so I could speak to the investigator when they asked me, well, why did Merrick come here? I gave him the reason. He then asked me, was Merrick recruited? I said no. He then asked me, how could I afford a house in Seattle and an apartment in Bellevue? I told him. He went on to ask me other questions about black athletes. And the more he questioned me about black athletes and not white athletes or our Asian athletes or our Hispanic athletes or our Muslim athletes or any of our other athletes, I said, you know, you should think about what you're doing, what you're saying, because it's starting to sound not too good. So he then went on to say, so tell me how you got Tyson Penn. Where'd you meet Tyson Penn? I told him. Was Tyson Penn recruited? No, he was not. So, why do you have a house in Seattle? Because I choose to. And why didn't you let Tyson go to the school in Seattle? Because I told you my son, Merrick, had a good experience here, and I could have taken Tyson to Seattle. I'm being a Catholic. Could have chosen any school for Tyson to go to. They get to get kids from 20, 30-mile radiuses, I think, according to the WIAA. You don't necessarily have to live in the district, being that you can live 20 to 30 miles away. So the public school system was quite different, but we went through the proper process. We went to the WIAA, the panel listened to us. They said that Tyson could play. He was approved to play. So therefore, Tyson being able to play, I asked them, why are you asking me these same questions over and over? I have sat through this. I sat through it to the point of having to take in Tyson's entire family into my home to let them live, because in a transfer, so you all know, the rule, because this is all about the rules, the rule is you cannot separate a family and transfer into another school their high school year. They all have to move as a collective group. You probably need to take the pets as well. So, anyway, they gave us the approval. I asked them, do I have to take in the whole family? Because I had been given legal guardianship over Tyson. Answer the question. They didn't have an answer. I said, I'll make it easy for you. I'll bring the whole family in. They can live with me. So that this child, because that's who we're talking about. We're talking about children. I know they're 18, but that means nothing. They're young boys. And so I said, we've gone through this process. Why are you asking me to go through it again? Because you've gone through my garbage. You've shown up at my home unannounced more than one occasion, suitcase in hand to go visit my college daughter in California. I'm still trying to participate, still trying to do what is right, yet you consistently ask me the same questions, racial questions. And someone said to me today, that's a big statement, you calling people racist. Why not just ignorant? Well, this is why. It's okay if the WIAA for the Bellevue School District Board came to my black home. And it's okay if they went to all the other black families and they asked all the same questions. It's America. It's not okay. Absolutely not okay for anyone to ask any black person or any person of that matter about their personal finances, to dehumanize them, to talk to them as if they do not deserve the same rights as the rest of the white Americans in Bellevue playing on the Bellevue football team, and not ask them the same questions. It is not okay. That's the difference between being ignorant and being racist. This investigation started off to find fault with our football program, and during that, birth was given to the very people who are supposed to protect our kids from harassment, from bullying, from intimidation. It's racist because you don't ask a black person how they can afford to live somewhere and not ask my white counterpart. It's racist because you don't ask a white person how much their mortgage is and how can they afford to pay it, and accept their answer, but not accept mine. If it's gonna be a level playing field, then we have to treat each other equally. And I don't really care anymore. Parents talk to me, they ask me to write for them, they ask me to talk for them. But one parent said to me, she sent me this email and she asked me to read it. And the email said that, basically, let me find it so that I will quote properly. The email said, as a family, we are proud Americans, and with that, we'll continue to move about our home state, the inner and outer lying cities, countries, and counties for that matter, as we have always freely chosen to do. Please respect that my child is focused on his academic studies and that he's not comfortable nor interested in today's modern day antics of prejudice. Moreover, he keeps his aim on the joys of success, hard work, the love of people, of sports, and overall happiness. And that's what this boils down to. Racism is an ugly, ugly thing. And I know that you people, and I might sound racist by using the word you people, but that's how the district investigators referred to us as you people. And then when I told them they were looking a little prejudiced, I made a phone call and I said, you know, you're looking a little prejudiced. You might want to call some white transfer students. I gave them the names of the white transfer students. They called them and they asked those friends of mine that had transferred, because we had that thing in common, how do they get to drive that type of car? How can they afford to be over here? Are you sure the Bellevue football program isn't paying for it? On the way out of my apartment, the first time, the older gentleman with a bow tie that looked like a good old boy said, are you sure somebody's not paying your rent? That's why I asked them to resign, to look in the mirror and realize that they are racist.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks, Marissa. So Marianne Jones is up next, and again, just kind of connecting the dots here is, I just cringe when I'm down here hearing racism, but it's not just about racism. That's one big thing, and it's huge, you know. But there were other kids in these investigations, and I wanted to bring you back to HIB, which doesn't have HIB-er, you know, meaning racism in there, but harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And I think that's really important because some of the other kids that weren't black, they were getting harassed into these questions about the black kids. So I just wanted to put that out there again. We've got all the documentation of it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but wanted to connect that dot because just what we saw in the last few days is, I know a lot of the press is writing, or people are talking and blogging that, hey, this is a smokescreen. Bellevue's throwing up a racist smokescreen. Nope, we're just letting you know it's here. And again, you know, I can't believe it, but it's one thing that we're going to stomp all over and hopefully make sure it doesn't happen again. With that, Marianne Jones.
So, I grew up in Clyde Hill. Pat grew up a block away from me in Clyde Hill. Same address, just one block away. We began a relationship in 1986. So 30 years I've been part of Bellevue football. Pat's been part of Bellevue football since he was 15 years old because that's when he started playing. So this whole investigation and years of investigations hit home. They hit deep home. But what Pat and I do when the going gets tough is we get tougher. We endure,
we fight, we stand up,
Just come back away from the press then.
and we're accountable. If we've screwed up, we say we've screwed up. And that's a lot of what you're gonna see. That's why you see all these long letters from Pat, is because he wants to see if he's part of something that's screwed up. He wants to know, because on the front end, he doesn't know. So I know you'll hear a lot tonight. Please listen, because he knows the facts. He requires honesty from people. If somebody is dishonest with him, they're gone. They are gone from his life. So, with that, I went into this investigation as an attorney, as a wife, as a mother, and as a member of the community, saying, are they lying to us? Is this really an investigation of the truth, of the facts? Or is this something else? Does it have a different motive? And of course, we saw in the newspaper that Mike Colbreeze, which I call King Mike, because he just runs the WIA and he doesn't have, in my opinion, anyone controlling him. So King Mike gave the mandate to level the playing field. And that was a to-do item for these investigators. Now, these investigators are seasoned prosecutors, criminal prosecutors. What they do is find people who have committed a crime and prove without a reasonable doubt that they have committed that crime. That's what they are seasoned to do, and guess what? They get to use all sorts of tactics to do that. They can lie in an interview to try to get an omission or to get a confession, and they can go through people's garbage, and they can assume things. They can be racist if they need to get somebody to admit that they've been doing something wrong. But what these investigators didn't know is that, or didn't realize, I guess, that they're not in a criminal prosecution setting here. They are just investigating a high school football team to see if anything's gone awry. So they've way overstepped their bounds. That became very clear to me in about October. So the investigation hadn't been going on very long. And repeatedly, I brought it to the board's attention that there was racism going on. Now, how did I know? Well, I've been a part of racist case before, discrimination cases before. I know what it looks like. I've been taught by experts. I've been educated, and I can see people that just are institutionalized that way. They don't even know they're racist. They just don't know. They grew up that way. They grew up in a generation, and they just don't get it. They don't understand that it's offensive to ask somebody how they pay their rent. So I sat in interview after interview after interview, and I watched it happen. I even watched it happen in Pat's interview. He wasn't asked how he could pay his rent on multiple houses or mortgage on multiple houses. He wasn't asked that question. He was asked how certain players, if he thought certain players, how they could pay their rent and how they could afford to live in Bellevue. So why are you asking me about players? Why are you asking me about what I think? It was ridiculous. In representing certain people, some people have jobs where they can't come up and talk. And this person works for the county. She's a corrections officer and can't publicly speak. But she was so livid at the fact that these investigators would ask her son, do you know who your landlord is? Do you know who paid your rent? That during the interview, she just lost it. And I tried to stop, at first I tried to stop her and just say, I tried to cut in and be like, okay, let's take a break. And then I got the evil eye, like, I'm not going anywhere. And then I had to stop the investigators and say, just let her say her piece. But the important thing about what she said was that the offensiveness and the fact that people had been through her garbage and called her son's friends and asked how he could afford his car and all those things, she said to me afterwards, they never got it. I looked in their eyes. They never got it. So they're not gonna get it. We just have to keep saying it. And maybe somebody in this process will get it. Here's what happened.
I'm paying the rent, sir. My husband's job pays the rent. Do you ask every other player on this team who pays their mortgage and rent?
Those who will talk to us, we do.
That's bullshit. You know why? Because I have players that have transferred here and have moved here, and you've never questioned them, okay? That's insulting for you to sit there and ask my son who pays the rent. He's a child. Because he's not African American, and you don't assume that he can't afford this rent penalty. Right, you just assumed. You just assumed that because I'm Hispanic and my kids are African American, I can afford to live here in Bellevue. And that's what makes me angry. You have harassed my family, okay? You have people go to my landlord and ask him how I pay the rent in this city. I work my ass off to get my kids here. And I have every right to move my kids to any school. You want to know why? Because I serve this country, because I have a good job. Go down that roster and ask every single family how they pay their.
They didn't go down the roster. They didn't ask every family. They just stopped with the African American families.
All right, thanks, Marianne. Okay, I know we're running long, but I think it's good to go through this. You've dedicated the time to come here tonight. Next up, we're going to have Mr. Scott Powers, the Bellevue High School principal, and Lauren McDaniel, the Bellevue High School athletic director, come up, and they're going to talk a little bit about the process that we're going through. So, okay, Lauren.
Thank you very much. Again, I've been the Bellevue High School principal for the last 5 years, and when the email went out announcing that there was going to be a community meeting, as principal, I really do feel compelled to be able to come here a little bit and talk about the process that we've undergone. When I reached out to Tina and Rob, one of her things that struck me in her email, and Tina and I have worked together a long time, is a phrase that we work together on, and we are Bellevue. And that we do stand together, and that this is a community and a community program. So my role really this evening is to help you understand a little bit of the different players and the different entities that have been involved in this process. I'm not at liberty, I'm gonna be very frank, I can't at liberty to speak about the contents of the investigation. That will be released on Tuesday, but just help people understand some of those pieces and the players. And then Ms. McDaniel's gonna talk about the process. So again, part of my role as principal is to make sure that we are supporting all of the programs and the different pieces in there. We also have a dual obligation to make sure that we fall underneath all of those rules. And so different speakers have talked about the WIA rules, the regulations, and there are policies and procedures within the district itself that govern both athletics and behavior of employees. In this case, because the initial allegations that came out were pretty substantive, it really was a determination that we needed to involve other players. So small issues, small things that happen within the school, Ms. McDaniel and I handled both of those. Given the scope of this, we reached out to our district personnel. Given that we knew that this would take way more time than we could devote. As a principal, we still have the daily responsibilities of kids showing up every day, being there, all the activities that happen. And so we asked that the district help and support us, And so John Harrison, who's the executive director, who's my direct supervisor, who supports me, became involved. And then Jeff Lowell, who is the district athletic and supports Lauren, got involved in handling the direct communication with WIA, helping set up the investigation. And then from there, really then being the conduit and communication aspect of it. Our role really became to provide information as it was requested. As a public agency, I get requested all the time, public records requests of any of my emails, communications, and other documents that I have. And part of it also is because we are connected with the school, trying to relay information to either families or parents involved here. The other person that was involved, obviously, then the group is the WIA. And so they oversee all of the interscholastic activities for the state of Washington. It's a member-driven program. Each of the schools pay a fee. They're part of that organization, and we all commit to following those rules and procedures that are laid out in there. And so that led us into asking for that investigation. And what I want to do is just have Lauren kind of give you a brief idea of the process, because a lot of times we've had an opportunity to share with coaches and different folks kind of what this looks like, but we haven't had an opportunity to reach out to you as a community yet to say, okay, this is what it's going to look like, where we've been, and where we're going to go from here.
Thank you. First off, thank you all for letting us be here. As Mr. Powers pointed out earlier, it's really important for us to be here and to let you guys know that we stand here with you and we are together as one community. So how did we get here and what is our process moving forward? As many people have mentioned before me tonight, there was that infamous article in the Seattle Times, the Diploma Mill article, that had really specific allegations that were made. The WIA is a membership-driven organization, and what that means is as a member school, being Bellevue, it is our obligation to look into allegations when they are made. And that process goes along with something called self-reporting. So anytime an allegation or a violation can come up, you need to go through the process of looking into it. And so that's what we did. And the district initiated that WIA investigation. The WIA took it upon themselves to hire the investigators that they did to run that investigation. Obviously, at this point, that investigation, that piece of it is done. The district has that report, and the process that we're in now, and we have already started, is following up with people that are mentioned in that report, doing interviews, collecting more information. Because what we need to do at this point is determine the allegations that have been made. Do they have violations? Have rules been broken? So the district and the school are playing a part in that and working with people to determine whether there are violations. Whether there are violations or not, because allegations have been made, once we conclude our portion as a school in the district, our job is to then go to the KINCO conference and report the findings, okay? So whether there are violations or not, we will report the findings. If there are no violations found, we report those findings and then we put an end to the allegations that were made in that Seattle Times article. If there are violations, we report those violations and then sanctions are determined from there depending on the severity of the violations. Once we make that report to KINCO, then it goes to the C-King committee to be approved. And once it's approved, then the case is closed, basically. So that's our process moving forward. Thank you.
Last thing I'll share with you is I think that part of also when we talk about the scope of the investigation that comes up, it's not just the questions that were sort of laid out in that scope, but I think people also need to understand this goes beyond our players and our coaches and our families, really extends to our entire athletic program, and actually extends up into our district and looking at the policies and procedures to see where we either did not have compliance on our end, where there were policies or procedures that allowed things to happen. So it really has been a full looking at an analysis of the entire district, the program, and then the specific athletic department in this school. So that's where we're sitting right now. Lauren and I have looked at the report. We have spent some time with it. It is sizable. Those of you see it, it's about 68 pages to begin, and that's the short version. And then there are 3 3-inch binders that go with it, that are the evidence pieces that are collected. So you understand the sizableness of that in time to actually review it with any sort of authenticity. And as Lauren said, to be able to follow up and say, okay, what other information before it goes public do we need to make sure we have in hand. So that will be coming out Tuesday, and it's red. So thank you for your time today.
And I do just want to touch on one last thing. We are aware of the grievances and the HIP complaints that have been made. That has been passed along to us, and we are aware that the district is following up on that, but we can't make any further comments on that.
Excuse me, I have a question. How active are you right now with the school board in reviewing what WIA found?
The school board is not reviewing it. The people that are reviewing that report are myself, Mr. Powers, the principal, and Jeff Loller, district athletic director.
Lauren, I have a question. You explained what the school does for, and when it goes to Kinko. Where are Butch's rights in there? He has union contractual rights. Where do his rights fit in your process?
So we always communicate with coaches prior to reporting a violation. Anybody that's involved in an actual violation, when that violation gets reported, we always inform the member involved in it prior to.
But
Thank
does
you.
he have a right to appeal or talk to you?
Oh, when it goes to appeal, so I believe what Mary Ann's asking is if we go to Kinko, we report a violation, the sanctions are handed out in that time frame. If we make a decision as a school, it has to be made a decision by the school and the school district to appeal those sanctions. That's the process in which we take. It has to be the school and the school district that come forward. Thank you.
Lauren, I have a question for you.
I'm not answering any more questions tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lauren, thank you, Scott. Okay, so now we're gonna turn over to Pat Jones. We're gonna go through some detail and some facts. And so we haven't seen that report, but we've done a lot of our own investigation. And I think it's good to say, you know, again, trying to connect the dots here is next Tuesday or whenever this report comes out, it's gonna be a shit show. There's no doubt, because it doesn't matter if it's good or bad or anything like that. It's not gonna be good for anybody. And I just wanna put that out there. It doesn't mean anybody's guilty or not guilty or anything like that. It's just, we're all gonna be drugged through the public grind again next week. So prepare for that, but again, we're prepared for that. So that's why I'm gonna turn over to this guy, Pat Jones.
Stay awake, Kendrick. Hey, I'm Pat. The two books you have up here, one was prepared by Bob Sulkin. I refer to it as the Sulkin Report. I'm not going to go into it right now on this one at all. The other one was a report that I've prepared along with other people. Since in the first investigation, we sort of felt like we were told to believe in the process, when I felt at the end that the process didn't really do what I thought it should have done. We did a lot of public record requests. We did a lot of homework. We went back. It's about 150, 60 pages long. I wrote nothing new. It's just exhibits of public records. I highlighted certain portions. Rob and Chris there'll be a link to this for people to get. There'll also be a link to this. What I would say to everybody is, regardless of what you've heard here tonight, regardless of what you hear me say, read it. Your kids will. They will, because it's going to be out there. There's a lot of information. Some of it will make you very mad. Some of it will make you very happy. But what I know is it's a lot of information, but read it. I mean, I'm serious. Anyways, so in it, you'll see that I've broken things down into roughly 9 different sections. I'm not going to obviously read all 160 pages here, but what I wanted to go through is kind of highlight certain portions of pages that I thought were really important as you leave here tonight. You kind of have in your head. You get that link, you can sit down on your own time when you want to and see what you think. And these all will speak for themselves, because I do agree with Bob Westinghouse on one thing: the facts will speak for themselves. On the first part of it, I prepared it. It's not, I left out probably 70% of the things. It's a timeline, and this is one part of it, one here, kind of starting back on a couple years ago up until today's date. You'll see it in the link. it goes through what I think is relatively significant events to kind of take us from one step to the other. So again, when you're reading my link, that's what this is referring to. So number one, my section number one is kind of regarding the diploma mill and Darian Freeman and what kind of started me on a further investigation. After I saw that article and started doing this, Darian was one of my first interviews, almost a 4-hour interview. When I go through the article here, it says, I'm talking about Jason Gardner now. Gardner described the school as a diploma mill. After he resigned, he filed a formal complaint outlining his ethical concerns with the State Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, which recommends to the State Board of Education whether such schools should be deemed approved. He also sent his complaint to the Bellevue School District. So that's out of the article. Gardner, the former academic institute teacher, told the Times, that's the issue. Money is getting in the way of doing the right thing. It's interesting Jason said that. So, what bothers me, with very little research, we were able to get some information on Mr. Gardner. And as Butch referenced earlier, he lied to an administrative law judge. So I'm quoting from, and in this book, and actually in Bob's book too, is the administrative law judge decision. It's not hard to get. In it, Mr. Gardner, it says, the claimant's allegation, the claimant is Mr. Gardner, the claimant's allegation that he resigned over sincerely held moral beliefs is not credible in light of his conduct and material inconsistencies in the record. The claimant resigned only after he was counseled about his job performance. Again, the claimant was not credible. That's in this, along in the same chapter of my book is a letter from Darian Freeman. It's funny, when I was being interviewed by the investigators, they tried to tell me that I wrote Darian's letter and that it was in the same font, or I don't know, whatever FBI crap they used to. I'm like, guys, I interviewed Darian for 4 hours. I scribed for him. I asked him I was his reporter. He didn't feel very good about what the Times article said. I listened to him. I coached him in youth football. I coached him in high school football. I know this kid. What I read in your paper, or that paper, was not Darian. So I asked him some questions. So anyways, this is what he had written after the Diploma Milk article had come out. And I'm just reading excerpts, so these are his words, not mine. You paint some picture in your newspaper like I am sitting alone in the room doodling or something. Man, this is just not right, Liebeskind, and that really pisses me off. That is not what I said, and what you wrote, you just made it up and took out keywords and important points in order to mislead anyone reading the article. They used me, they lied to me, and Liebeskind told me stuff that was just not true. And guys, I'm really sorry that I ever spoke to the dude. He is bad news, literally. That's in this report. And next, I'm skipping to an August 26, 2015 letter from Mr. and Mrs. Freeman to Jeff Lowell. Again, this is just after the Diploma Mill article. The article is false and misleading, and our son Darian is misquoted and his words taken completely out of context. They came to him with false information, making false claims of things they had uncovered about his family and his situation while he was at Bellevue High School and Academic Institute. They lied to him and they tricked him. If the Seattle Times is going to quote me and put things I supposedly said into the newspaper, then they need to come to me and talk to me instead of harassing and bullying my son with false information and playing reporter games with him to get him to say things that he really had no actual knowledge of. Again, Alana and I did not and do not involve our teenage children with our financial information. Who does? I found that interesting in a lot of the investigations I heard about. Of course Darian would not know who footed the bill. Why would we tell him that? We are his parents. That's our issue to deal with, not our teenage sons. The awful article by the Seattle Times then goes on to quote Darian as saying, I was told I'm going here and everything is going to be taken care of. If you remember, it was in big, black, bold letters across the newspaper. Boy, talk about things being taken out of context. This is so bad by these reporters, awful. Of course I told my son where he's going to attend school, and of course I told him everything is going to be taken care of. Then and again, read the letter of Darian's for yourself. one of the things that when I interviewed Darian that came out, when you look at the end of the Academic Institute article, you'll see it say, and I'll quote the article right here, Freeman, it's all about Weber State, is what this is being referenced to. Freeman left Weber State in football after 1 year. He now says, quote, if it wasn't for football, I just feel like I wasn't wanted, end of quote, at Bellevue. That's not what Darian said. Darian said at Weber State, but it falls outside the quotes. This is bad. If you take that and put what Darian actually said about it being, Darian's the whole paragraph's about Weber State, but when you read it, it looks like Darian had people doing something to him at Bellevue that made him not want to be there. And what he was talking about is why he left Weber State after 1 year. Just a perfectly bad example of what happened in that article to him. Section 2 in my report talks a lot about what happened the first time and what kind of led me to ever actually, with a few other people, start this investigation of our own. I always call it the investigation into the investigation. And so going back to the first investigation as well as the other, we found some things that we thought were very ironic. So I'm quoting you, and a lot of you already have all this information, so you'll know what I'm talking about. This is from the Mercer Island football website. You know, this isn't our words. Subsidies and administrative support for off-season player development, including Steve Jervis Passing Academy and Kevin Child's speed and strength training programs. Subsidies and administrative support, okay. Juanita football website, morning workouts. Our strength and conditioning program will begin on Tuesday, January 6th at 6 a.m. Have you ever got an email from me or Butch telling you that? Ever? Ever? Boy, okay. Skyline football website. This one's a doozy. Our head coach strongly encourages involvement and attendance to the full schedule of sessions offered as one of the key elements of our continued success. Participation is as important as other football-related activities, summer camps, and in-season practices. Other non-football activities may interfere with 100% attendance, but each player's commitment to individual achievement and team success is always the primary focus. Because this is also team building, only football players can participate. Can you imagine if we said that? One flat, one rate player fee, regardless of start date or sessions attended, was established to meet the contractual requirements needed to secure Coach Childs for the full year of sessions. We're only able to offer this program at the same low annual rate year after year because of participation levels. Individual programs such as this cost hundreds of dollars a month, no discounts offered, including those from any payment plans available. Anyways, that took very little to find that. So, in the first investigation, because I've never really got to circle back, or we're still feeling like we didn't even get over that one, and then we got the new one. So, I can say and looking at you, everybody here, with utmost factual certainty here, I still do not know what anyone's talking about with off-season weight training and conditioning violations or illegal practices. I still do not know. It's April 2016. I do not know. I'm the assistant head football coach. I must be that dumb. This says, during the course of the investigation, it was also discovered that the strength and conditioning program for the Bellevue High School football players is not in compliance with WIA regulations. I don't know what we're supposed to do. We don't know. We still don't know. Butch was not provided with the 21-page report done by the investigator. He got it from Todd. We couldn't get it. We wrote a letter about it. Mr. Thomas, who's Dr. Thomas, is in charge of human resources at Bellevue School District. It is a complete fabrication on the part of this investigation to state that the football program tells any of its players that, quote, they must attend these off-season conditioning sessions. There are many pluses to attending, as I'm sure you are aware, improving strength, lessening the chance of injury in the future, general body health, camaraderie, etc. The implication here by the investigation is that players get some kind of negative consequence if they don't attend, so they must attend. What are these negative consequences? This was a letter that when Butch filed his grievance through the Coaches Association. You guys have been with us have you ever had any negative consequences for not being in the weight room? What are these negative consequences? I don't know. No one's ever told me, because it's not true. Part of the same letter. Mr. Thomas, the weight room is open to all students. Please provide a list to me of all students who wanted to participate but were denied access. There are 0. BSD and its investigator are misconstruing the rules and the spirit of the rules here. There is no sport-specific skill being taught by a school coach in the sport coached. No coach is sponsoring or coaching or directing activities resembling out-of-season practices or contests. I mean, I'm gonna fight you in the argument if you tell me power cleans, squats, certain types of pulls are somehow sport-specific activities. That's not correct. I still don't know. So I can't go too far into Butch's deal because he's represented by counsel. He is at a level 4 appeal through the coach's contract, which means it goes before the American Arbitration Association next. They did take it up through us, through level 3, and going backwards, us as the Bellevue Coaches Association is not Bellevue High specific, it's all 4 high schools. So it's a collective association. At level 3, however, they did offer to remove Butch's letter of reprimand from the file, but they only granted his grievance in part and denied it in part. They gave a little bit here and there, and they elected not to accept that, which I think was the right thing to do. So that one is still to be taken care of after all of this, believe it or not. So, going to a couple other specifics here along the same lines. We all remember this article, Bellevue coach failed to report threatening incident. This is again from the first investigation. So in this report, you'll see a September 1 letter from Principal Powers, who wrote a very well, thank you, eloquent letter. And part of that letter says, I acknowledge you informed me in a timely manner about the meeting. He reported. That's not what it says here, Seattle Times. On the front page. Next, you'll find a little section on Matt Coombs. Matt Coombs is now with Boise State, which I'm really glad he was. But they called me, or they called us, because there was an issue. Because online, Matt Coombs did something really bad. It says he failed to intervene. He failed to act. Matt's like, what? So the person from Boise State gave him a call and said, hey, we got some issues. We'd like, we might be thinking we have to talk to you about some issues here. Because in the newspaper, that wasn't in the Times, that one went into the Bellevue Reporter. You pop up his name online, up that pops that article. Follows you forever. What doesn't follow you forever is what happened in the end. He went through the Coaches Association grieved. And literally. And it says here, the final findings of his appeal are, the letter of reprimand be removed from your personnel file. The sanction of probation for 1 year shall be removed for you. Did you read that in the newspaper? I didn't. But I ended up writing a letter, like a to whom it may concern letter, which went to Boise State, and Matt did end up there. But it was not good that happened. Okay, now in your mind, kind of go back to the first, about the beginning of June. A lot of reprimand letters are going out to coaches, and things have gone to the school district. There's a person there named Elizabeth Seitman. She's the BSD public relations person. So I'm reading quotes from their emails that we obtained through public records disclosure. This one's from Elizabeth. Also attached is a chain of, or this is one that's from me explaining what's from Elizabeth. And I sent this letter to the investigators after my interview because they couldn't get them. I said, you ought to read them. I'll give them to you. I got nothing, I feel like I'm the only one being transparent in this whole thing. I don't have any secrets. So like my wife said, she's serious. I'm transparent on this stuff. I don't care. If it's true, good. If we're lying, show me. Also attached is a chain of emails with attachments of John Harrison, Dr. Mills, and Elizabeth Seitman that I obtained through the public records request process as part of my own investigation. The final 2 emails in that chain are Elizabeth Seidman emailing Dr. Mills and John Harrison on Sunday, June 7th, 2015 at 6:06 p.m. She includes in this email an attachment which Principal Powers wrote, and it was well written, wrote along with her edited version of the same letter which she felt should go to the Times and be from either just Mr. Powers or from Mr. Powers and Mr. Lowell. On top of that, she also includes a second letter she thought should come from the school district, and in it she states that the Seattle Times, quote, willfully misled the public, end of quote. Again, this is the Bellevue School District public relations person telling her bosses the Seattle Times willfully misled the public. Did you ever read that in the newspaper? I didn't. Following this email at 6:06 p.m. on the same day at 10:27 p.m., a response email came back from John Harrison that states, in response to Mrs. Seidman's proposed 2 letters, which I'll read to you in a second, looks like we're in a holding pattern. That's the last email in the thread. Ladies and gentlemen, we're still in a holding pattern. We haven't heard that yet. The email does not copy Dr. Mills nor Ms. Seidman and only copied Mr. Lowell and Mr. Powers. Presumably there were telephone calls between Mrs. Seidman and Dr. Mills and Mr. Harrison in the 4-hour block where there were no emails sent, but I don't know that. The Elizabeth Seidman letter of support for the program and notification to the public that the Times willfully misled the public was never sent, nor was it printed in the newspaper. This fact is incredibly telling and disturbing for many, as it clearly showed a lack of support by Dr. Mills and Mr. Harrison for the football program. Even when their own public relations person is providing them with a very supportive and well-written statement, our leaders chose not to support us at that time. And as we continue to ask yourselves, why didn't they? Mrs. Seidman obviously did, but Dr. Mills and Mr. Harrison did not. Again, this is a letter that I wrote, and it refers to these documents that we obtained through the public records process. June 6, 10:30 something p.m. from Elizabeth Seidman to Mr. Lowell, Mr. Harrison, Mr. Powers. And I'm only reading the parts I highlighted here, I'm not reading all the whole letter. If there is a KINCO or WIA connection, that would help, as they should be the official voice who calls the Seattle Times out for their misstep. And it was a misstep. When I read the editorial, all I could think was that the editorial board is clearly trying to make news and they don't know anything about WIA or high school athletics. We need someone from KINCO or WIA to call the Times out for targeting Bellevue High and provide the data background on why the violations are not significant and do not constitute a smoking gun. John, have you touched base with Tim at all? That was part of it? June 7th, 10:27 p.m. The second letter should come from John or Jeff and address the district voice in all of this, as well as shedding light on how we handle investigations. Additionally, we learned that a Sea King director also submitted a letter questioning the editorial board on their coverage and basically called them out for not verifying facts. And here come the letters. Oh, sure.
Sorry, this isn't part of it. I wanted everyone to know that I met with Dr. Mills in August and specifically asked him for support of our program, our school, our coaches, and I did not have this information. And he told me that he would, and when I realized after the fact that it was actually shut down, that there actually was support by Elizabeth Seidman, that there actually was support, and he made the decision not to support us, I knew what this was all about.
So again, Mr. Powers had written a very well-written, eloquent document. Part of it is in here. Then there was supposedly another letter that was going to come out that would come from directly the district, according to Elizabeth. The Seattle Times was personal, misleading, and lacked character. Again, I'm just reading excerpts. And then in regard to the recruiting allegation, which if you remember that we were busted for illegal recruiting. To portray this mistake, however, as, quote, illegal recruiting, end of quote, is just wrong. The Seattle Times editorial board simply got it wrong and willfully misled the public. To portray this mistake is worded a different way on a different draft. To portray this mistake, however, as illegal recruiting is misleading. The Seattle Times reporter was negligent. These are their words, not mine. We get another headline, Bellevue coach suspended over improper recruiting. We've all seen it. Again, to portray this mistake, however, as illegal recruiting is misleading. Did you read that in the newspaper? I didn't. The Seattle Times reporter simply got it wrong. This is part of, I believe, a letter that Mr. Powers had put together that they had to condense to quite a bit smaller, so parts of it left. And he says, there is no smoking gun here, there is no corrosive effect on high school sports. I want you to know that he did speak up.